Detective Sarah Chen adjusted her badge as she walked through the marble corridors of the Riverside County Courthouse, her footsteps echoing against the polished floors. It was a Tuesday morning in September, and the California sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the hallways filled with attorneys, defendants, and their families. Sarah had been a detective for 8 years, but today felt routine, just another court appearance to testify in a drug trafficking case that had consumed months of her life. Beside her, Rex padded silently on his leash, his black and tan coat gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The 4-year-old German Shepherd had been her partner for nearly 3 years now, and in that time, they developed an almost telepathic connection. Rex wasn't just a drug detection dog, he was her eyes, ears, and instincts rolled into one perfectly trained package. His record was flawless: 156 successful drug busts, 0 false positives, and a nose so sensitive he could detect narcotics through multiple layers of concealment. As they approached Courtroom 3B, Sarah noticed the usual pretrial chaos. Defense attorneys shuffled through last-minute paperwork, prosecutors reviewed their notes, and court reporters prepared their equipment. The bailiff, Deputy Maria Gonzalez, nodded respectfully as Sarah signed in. Everything appeared normal, professional, predictable. "We'll be calling you to the stand in about 20 minutes, Detective Chen," said Ada Patricia Mills, the lead prosecutor. "On the case, just standard testimony about the search and seizure at the warehouse." Sarah nodded and found a seat in the gallery, Rex settling beside her with practiced ease. Judge Margaret Torres entered precisely at 9 a.m., her black robes flowing as she took her position behind the imposing wooden bench. Torres was known throughout the county as a no-nonsense judge with 15 years of experience and a reputation for fairness tempered with strict adherence to procedure. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Torres," called the bailiff, but as Sarah stood, something extraordinary happened. Rex, who had been lying calmly at her feet, suddenly shot upright as if struck by lightning. His ears snapped forward, every muscle in his body tensed, and his nose began working frantically, sniffing the air with an intensity Sarah had never witnessed in all their years together. A low whine escaped Rex's throat, growing progressively louder. His powerful body trembled with restraint as he strained against his leash, pulling with surprising force toward the front of the courtroom. Sarah's heart rate quickened. She knew Rex's body language better than her own, and this wasn't normal alerting behavior. This was desperation. "Rex, sit," she commanded in a firm whisper, but her partner ignored her completely. His brown eyes were fixed on one specific target, Judge Torres' bench, the ornate wooden structure, carved from mahogany and standing as a symbol of justice for over 30 years, seemed to be calling to every instinct Rex possessed. The whining escalated into sharp, urgent barks that cut through the formal atmosphere like a knife. Every head in the courtroom turned toward Sarah and Rex. Judge Torres paused in her opening remarks, her eyebrows furrowing with obvious displeasure. "Detective Chen," Judge Torres said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to maintaining order, "please control your animal. This is a court of law, not a training facility." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I apologize, Your Honor." Rex down, but Rex was beyond responding to commands. He had entered what trainers called intensive alert mode, a state so focused and driven that nothing else existed in his world except the source of whatever scent had triggered his response. He pulled harder, his claws scraping against the marble floor as he tried to reach the judge's bench. "Your Honor," Sarah said, standing and struggling to maintain control of her 85-pound partner, "I need to remove him from the courtroom. This behavior is completely out of character." Judge Torres' expression softened slightly, recognizing the genuine confusion and embarrassment in Sarah's voice. "Very well. Deputy Gonzalez, please escort Detective Chen and her K9 to the hallway. We'll continue without the dog present." As Sarah wrestled Rex toward the exit, she couldn't shake the image burned into her memory. Her perfectly trained, utterly reliable partner transformed into a frantic, desperate animal fixated on the very seat of justice itself. In the hallway, Rex gradually calmed, but his eyes kept darting back toward the closed courtroom doors. "What the hell was that about?" Sarah muttered, kneeling beside Rex and running her hands through his fur. His heart was still racing, and when she looked into his eyes, she saw something that chilled her, fear mixed with an urgent need to protect. Rex had been trying to tell her something, and whatever it was important enough to override years of training and discipline. As she waited in the corridor for her testimony to be called, Sarah couldn't escape the growing certainty that her partner had just detected something that would change everything. Something was wrong in Courtroom 3B, and Rex knew it. 3 days had passed since Rex's inexplicable outburst in Courtroom 3B, and Detective Sarah Chan couldn't shake the memory of her partner's frantic behavior. She'd run Rex through every diagnostic test she could think of: health checks, training, exercises, even bringing him to other courtrooms in the building. Each time, he performed flawlessly, his behavior returning to the calm, professional demeanor that had made him one of the county's most reliable K-9 officers. But something nagged at her. In 8 years of police work, Sarah had learned to trust her instincts, and right now, every instinct screamed that Rex had been trying to communicate something critical. She'd filed an incident report, noting the unusual behavior, but couldn't bring herself to dismiss it as a one-time anomaly. Her chance for answers came unexpectedly on Friday morning, when Officer Michael Rodriguez called her cell phone at 7:30 a.m. Mike was a veteran K-9 handler with 12 years of experience, and his chocolate Labrador, Scout, had an impressive track record in narcotics detection throughout Southern California. "Sarah, you're not going to believe what just happened." Mike's voice was tight with confusion and concern. "I was at the courthouse yesterday for the Henderson drug case, and Scout went absolutely insane. I mean, completely lost his mind." Sarah's grip tightened on her phone. "What courtroom?" 3B. The moment we walked in, Scout started acting like he'd found the mother lode of narcotics. But here's the weird part: he wasn't alerting on any person or evidence bag. He was fixated on the judge's bench, just like— Mike paused, realization dawning in his voice. "Just like you described Rex doing." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "Tell me exactly what happened." Mike's account was eerily familiar. Scout had entered the courtroom calmly, then suddenly became agitated, pulling toward the front of the room with desperate intensity. The lab had whined, barked, and completely ignored Mike's commands, behavior so out of character that Judge Torres had questioned whether the dog was ill. "I've been thinking about it for 2 days," Mike continued. "Scout's never acted like that before. Never. And the thing is, I tried bringing him back to the courthouse yesterday afternoon during a break in proceedings. Same reaction. It's like something in that specific courtroom is setting off every alarm bell in his head." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. 2 different dogs, 3 days apart. Identical reactions. This wasn't coincidence. "Mike, we need to talk to Security Chief Bradley about this. Have you heard if any other K-9 units have been in that courtroom recently, within 2 hours? Sarah and Mike were sitting in Tom Bradley's office, along with records showing that for other K-9 units had made appearances in Courtroom 3B over the past month. Bradley, a former Marine with 23 years in courthouse security, listened with growing concern as they outlined their observations. "Let me make some calls," Bradley said, reaching for his phone. "If this pattern is real, we need to know about it." The calls revealed a disturbing truth. Every single K-9 officer who had entered Courtroom 3B in recent weeks reported unusual behavior from their dogs. Officer Jeanne Kim's Belgian Malinois Ranger had become so agitated during a weapons possession hearing that he'd had to be removed. Detective Paul Morrison's Bloodhound, Duke, had exhibited similar fixation on the judge's bench during testimony in a robbery case. "This is impossible," Bradley muttered, spreading the incident reports across his desk. 5 different dogs, different breeds, different training backgrounds, different handlers, but every single one reacted the same way. Sarah leaned forward, studying the timeline. "Tom, what's the common denominator here? Same courtroom, same target area, the judge's bench. These dogs are trained to detect narcotics, explosives, weapons. They don't just go crazy for no reason." Mike nodded grimly. "In 12 years of K-9 work, I've learned that when a dog tells you something's wrong, you listen. When 5 dogs tell you the same thing, he let the implication hang in the air." Bradley pulled up the courthouse layout on his computer, highlighting Courtroom 3B. This courtroom is identical in construction to 3A and 3C on either side. Same ventilation system, same materials, built at the same time. But according to your reports, dogs show zero interest in those other courtrooms. "Have you noticed anything else unusual about 3B?" Sarah asked. "Any maintenance issues? Security concerns? Anything out of the ordinary?" Bradley frowned, scrolling through his computer files. "Actually, yes. We've had intermittent problems with the security cameras in that courtroom. technical glitches, mostly during overnight hours. I've had the IT department look at it twice, but they can't find any hardware problems. Sarah and Mike exchanged glances. Security camera malfunctions during overnight hours, combined with multiple drug detection dogs alerting on the same location, painted a picture that made Sarah's detective instincts go into overdrive. Tom, Sarah said carefully, I think we need to consider the possibility that something is happening in that courtroom. Something these dogs are detecting that we're not seeing. Bradley leaned back in his chair, his expression grave. You're talking about conducting an investigation into a sitting judge's courtroom based on the behavior of police dogs. I'm talking about conducting an investigation into whatever is making 5 highly trained narcotics detection dogs lose their minds. In the same specific location, Sarah replied, These dogs don't lie, Tom. They can't lie. If they're telling us something's wrong, then something's wrong. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just dealing with unusual animal behavior anymore. They were potentially looking at something that threatened the integrity of the justice system itself. All right, Bradley said finally, let's figure out what these dogs are trying to tell us. Judge Margaret Torres sat in her private chambers long after the courthouse had emptied, staring at the stack of case files on her mahogany desk. The events of the past week had shaken her more than she cared to admit. In 15 years on the bench, she presided over thousands of cases, dealt with disruptions both minor and major, but nothing had prepared her for the systematic breakdown of police canine behavior in her courtroom. The initial incident with Detective Chen's German Shepherd had been troubling enough, but the subsequent reports from Security Chief Bradley painted a picture that made her question everything she thought she knew about her own workplace. 5 different dogs, all exhibiting identical behavior, all fixated on her bench, the very symbol of her authority and the cornerstone of justice in her courtroom. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Deputy Maria Gonzalez, her bailiff for the past 7 years, peered through the doorway. Maria was more than just courthouse staff. She was a trusted confidant who had witnessed every triumph and challenge of Torres' judicial career. Judge, you're working late again, Maria said, stepping into the chamber. Everything all right? Torres gestured to the chair across from her desk. Maria, sit down. I need to ask you something, and I want your honest opinion. Maria settled into the familiar chair, her expression growing serious. She'd known Judge Torres long enough to recognize when something was truly troubling her. These incidents with the police dogs, Torres began. You've been present for most of them. What's your take? Am I missing something obvious? Maria shifted uncomfortably, choosing her words carefully. Judge, in 7 years of working this courtroom, I've seen a lot of unusual things. Defendants having breakdowns, attorneys losing their composure, technical difficulties with equipment. But this, she paused, shaking her head. This is different. These aren't just random disruptions. There's a pattern here that doesn't make sense unless something is genuinely wrong. Torres leaned forward. Wrong how? I've worked with K9 units before, back when I was with the sheriff's department. Those dogs don't just lose their training. They don't ignore their handlers unless they detected something that overrides every instinct. They've been taught. And Judge, every single one of those dogs was focused on the same spot directly below your bench. The words hung in the air between them, carrying implications that neither woman wanted to voice. Torres felt a chill that had nothing to do with the courthouse's aggressive air conditioning. Meanwhile, 3 floors below in the basement maintenance area, Frank Wilson was having his own unsettling realization. The 62-year-old maintenance supervisor had worked in the courthouse for over a decade, and he prided himself on knowing every sound, every creak, every mechanical rhythm of the building. But lately, something was off. It had started about 2 months ago, subtle at first, easy to dismiss as the normal settling of an aging building. Footsteps in corridors that should be empty. The faint sound of doors opening and closing during the early morning hours when only security guards should be present. Voices that seemed to echo from the upper floors long after the last employee had gone home. Frank had mentioned it to the night security guards, but they dismissed his concerns. Old buildings make noise, Frank, they'd said. You're hearing things. But Frank knew better. He'd spent years learning to distinguish between the natural sounds of the courthouse and genuinely unusual activity. These weren't random noises. They followed a pattern, occurring roughly twice a week, always between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., always seeming to originate from the 3rd floor, where the main courtrooms were located. The breakthrough came on a Wednesday night when Frank decided to investigate personally. armed with a flashlight and his master key ring. He made his way through the darkened building at 11:45 p.m. The marble floors felt different at night, somehow more imposing under the dim emergency lighting dot as he climbed the stairs to the third floor. Frank heard them clearly for the first time, muffled voices coming from the direction of Courtroom 3B. His heart hammered as he realized that someone was definitely in the building without authorization. But who and why that specific courtroom? Frank crept closer, his maintenance boots silent on the polished floor. The voices were clearer now to men, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone suggested they were conducting business of some kind. Important business that couldn't wait for normal hours. When the voices stopped abruptly, Frank retreated quickly, his mind racing. The next morning, he placed a call to Security Chief Bradley, sharing his observations for the first time. Bradley listened with growing alarm as Frank described weeks of unauthorized nighttime activity centered around Courtroom 3B, combined with the K9 incidents and the mysterious camera malfunctions. A disturbing picture was emerging. Frank, why didn't you report this earlier? Bradley asked. The maintenance supervisor's voice was tired. Tom, I'm 62 years old. I thought maybe I was imagining things, you know. But after hearing about all those police dogs acting up in the same courtroom, I can't ignore it anymore. Bradley immediately pulled the security footage logs for the past 8 weeks, focusing on the overnight hours Frank had mentioned. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The cameras in and around Courtroom 3B experienced technical difficulties on the exact nights Frank had heard unusual activity. The timing was too precise to be coincidental. Later that afternoon, Bradley met with Jonna Phillips, the courthouse administrator, in her office overlooking the main entrance. Phillips, a sharp-eyed woman with 20 years of government administration experience, listened gravely as Bradley outlined the accumulating evidence. You're telling me, Phillips said slowly, that we have multiple K9 alerts, systematic camera failures, and unauthorized after-hours access, all centered on Judge Torres' courtroom? That's exactly what I'm telling you. And Jonna, there's something else. I've been reviewing the access logs for the past 2 months. Every night that Frank heard activity, at least one key card was used to enter the building. But the logs show the entries were made with cards belonging to employees who were definitely not here. Phillips felt her stomach drop. Clone cards, or someone with legitimate access, is involved. Bradley's voice was grim. Either way, we're looking at a serious security breach that may involve insider knowledge. As the pieces of the puzzle came together, one terrifying truth became clear. Courtroom 3B, the sanctum of justice where Judge Torres had presided over hundreds of cases, was being used for something that made highly trained narcotics dogs desperate to investigate. And whoever was responsible had intimate knowledge of courthouse operations, security protocols, and the building's vulnerabilities. The question was no longer whether something illegal was happening in Judge Torres' courtroom. The question was how deep the corruption ran and who could be trusted to help uncover the truth. The emergency meeting convened at 6 p.m. in Security Chief Bradley's office, the blinds drawn tight against the fading California sunlight. Present were Detective Sarah Chen, Officer Mike Rodriguez, Courthouse Administrator Jonna Phillips, and Bradley himself. The atmosphere was thick with tension as they reviewed the mounting evidence that pointed to a sophisticated criminal operation using Courtroom 3B as its base. Before we go any further, Phillips said, her voice steady but strained, I need to make something clear. If we're wrong about this, if we're chasing shadows based on dog behavior and maintenance worker suspicions, we could destroy careers and undermine public confidence in our entire judicial system. Sarah leaned forward, Rex lying alert at her feet. And if we're right, Jonna, then we're looking at corruption that goes to the heart of our justice system. Those dogs don't lie. Rex has been my partner for 3 years, and I've never seen him react like that to anything. Mike nodded grimly. Scout's the same way. 12 years I've been doing this job, and I've learned to trust my dog's nose more than my own eyes. When he tells me something's there, something's there. Bradley spread a series of photographs across his desk, security camera timestamps showing the systematic failures that occurred during Frank Wilson's reported incidents. Look at this pattern. Camera malfunctions every Tuesday and Friday night, lasting exactly 3 hours. That's not equipment failure. That's deliberate sabotage. Phillips studied the images, her administrative mind processing the implications. The key card access logs show entries during those exact time windows. Someone with legitimate credentials is either involved or their cards have been compromised. Which brings us to tonight, Bradley said, pulling out building schematics. Frank heard activity again last night. If the pattern holds, they'll be back tomorrow night Friday. We have one chance to catch them in the act. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. You're talking about a stakeout operation inside the courthouse. That's exactly what I'm talking about. But this has to be done right. We can't just storm in there. We need evidence, documentation, and most importantly, we need to identify everyone involved. Mike studied the courthouse layout. Where do we position ourselves? If these people know the building well enough to disable cameras, they'll know the sightlines and hiding spots. Bradley pointed to adjacent offices. Courtroom 3A shares a wall with 3B. There's a maintenance access panel that would give us visual and audio surveillance. We can also position someone in the clerk's office across the hall. Phillips looked uncomfortable. Who are we bringing in on this? The more people who know, the higher the risk of a leak. Just us. Bradley said firmly, Sarah, Mike, and myself. 3 people, 2 dogs, and enough recording equipment to document whatever we find. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. What's our legal standing here? Are we conducting an official investigation? Or we're courthouse security responding to multiple reports of unauthorized after-hours activity? Bradley interrupted. Everything we do tonight is within our authority to protect courthouse property and personnel. The next 24 hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Sarah ran Rex through extra training exercises, ensuring he was sharp and responsive. Mike did the same with Scout. Both officers reviewed the courthouse blueprints until they could navigate the building blindfolded. As Friday evening approached, Bradley coordinated with the night security guards, instructing them to maintain their normal patrol patterns while staying clear of the 3rd floor after 11 p.m. The fewer variables in play, the better their chances of success. At 10:30 p.m., the 3 officers met in the courthouse parking garage. They were dressed in dark clothing and equipped with night vision equipment, recording devices, and communication gear. Rex and Scout seemed to sense the importance of the mission, their behavior more alert and focused than usual. Remember, Bradley whispered as they entered through a service entrance, we document everything. No matter what we see, no matter how shocking it might be, our primary job is to gather evidence. They made their way through the darkened building, their footsteps muffled by shoe covers. The courthouse felt different at night, more imposing, shadows seeming to hide secrets in every corner. Sarah's hand rested on Rex's head, drawing comfort from her partner's steady presence. The team positioned themselves in the predetermined locations, Sarah and Rex in the maintenance access area adjacent to Courtroom 3B, Mike and Scout in the clerk's office across the hall, and Bradley in a security station where he could monitor the buildings remaining functional. Cameras dotted 11:15 p.m., their radios crackled softly. Movement at the east entrance, Bradley's voice whispered, to figures approaching. Sarah's heart began hammering as she peered through the maintenance panel small window. Into Courtroom 3B, the room was dark, lit only by emergency lighting, but she could see the imposing silhouette of Judge Torres' bench. Rex tensed beside her, his body going rigid with the same alertness he displayed during their previous courthouse visits. But this time, Sarah was ready to trust his instincts completely, visual on subjects entering the building. Bradley reported, using key card access, moving towards stairs through her earpiece. Sarah heard the distant sound of footsteps echoing in the marble corridors. Whoever was coming knew exactly where they were going, moving with the confidence of people who had done this many times before. There on the 3rd floor, Mike whispered from his position. Heading directly toward 3B, Sarah adjusted her night vision equipment and checked her recording device one final time. In moments, they would finally discover what had been driving 5 different police dogs to desperation, what had been worth the risk of systematic security breaches, and who had been willing to corrupt the very heart of the justice system. Rex's low growl vibrated through the darkness as the courtroom door opened and the figure stepped inside. Sarah held her breath, knowing that everything they had suspected, everything they had feared, was about to be revealed in the chamber where justice was supposed to reign supreme. The trap was set, and the hunters had become the hunted. The courtroom door creaked open with a sound that seemed to echo through Sarah's bones. Through her night vision equipment, she watched the shadowy figures enter Courtroom 3B with the casual confidence of people who belonged there. Rex's body trembled with barely contained energy beside her. Every muscle coiled like a spring ready to unleash years of training and protective instinct. The first figure moved directly toward the judge's bench, pulling out what appeared to be a small flashlight. As the beam illuminated his face, Sarah's blood turned to ice. She recognized him immediately. Robert Hayes, the deputy court clerk who had processed her paperwork dozens of times over the past 3 years. Hayes was a fixture in the courthouse, a quiet, efficient man in his mid-40s who had earned respect through 12 years of dedicated service. "Jesus Christ," she whispered into her radio, her voice barely audible. "It's Robert Hayes from the clerk's office." The second figure remained in the shadows near the door, apparently serving as a lookout. Sarah strained to get a clear view, but his face remained hidden in the darkness. What she could see was his nervous energy constantly shifting weight, checking his watch, glancing toward the corridor as if expecting trouble. Hayes moved with practiced efficiency toward the judge's bench, his actions revealing the confidence of someone who had performed this routine many times before. He knelt beside the imposing wooden structure and ran his hands along what appeared to be a seamless panel. Sarah heard a faint click, followed by the soft sound of wood sliding against wood. "There's a hidden compartment," Sarah reported, her camera recording everything. Hayes just opened some kind of concealed panel in the judge's bench. Through her night vision scope, she watched in fascination and horror as Hayes reached into the compartment and began removing packages, small, carefully wrapped bundles that could only contain one thing. The methodical way he handled them, the reverent care he showed, left no doubt about their contents. Rex's growl deepened, a sound that seemed to emanate from his very soul. Sarah placed her hand on his head, silently commanding him to remain still. But she could feel his desperate need to act. Every instinct he possessed was screaming that criminals were operating just yards away, and his training demanded he alert and apprehend. "Mike, are you getting this?" Sarah whispered. Crystal clear came the response from across the hall. "Scout's going crazy over here. I can barely keep him quiet." Hayes worked with the efficiency of a seasoned professional, removing packages from the compartment and replacing them with others he brought in a leather satchel. Sarah counted at least 8 exchanges, each package roughly the size of a brick and wrapped in what appeared to be vacuum-sealed plastic. The lookout finally moved into the light, and Sarah's heart nearly stopped. Marcus Webb, a name she knew from court records, a defendant who had appeared before Judge Torres just 6 weeks earlier on drug trafficking charges. Sarah remembered the case because of how it had ended. Charges mysteriously dropped due to procedural errors in the evidence chain of custody. "The second subject is Marcus Webb," Sarah reported, her mind racing with implications. "He was a defendant in Torres court last month. Drug charges that were dismissed." Webb moved closer to Hayes, speaking in urgent whispers that Sarah's equipment couldn't quite capture, but their body language told a story of partnership, familiarity, and mutual dependence. This wasn't a one-time collaboration. These two had been working together for months, possibly longer. Bradley's voice crackled through the radio. "Building perimeter is secure. No other activity detected." "How much longer do they need?" "Hayes is almost finished," Sarah reported, watching as the clerk made his final exchanges. "Whatever this operation is, it's sophisticated." That compartment was professionally installed. As Hayes began closing the hidden panel, Webb moved to the courtroom windows, peering through the blinds at the parking lot below. His paranoia was evident in every gesture, constantly checking for any sign that their activities had been detected. Sarah found herself holding her breath as Hayes completed his work. The judge's bench looked exactly as it had before, no sign that it had been modified, no indication that it served as anything other than the symbol of justice it appeared to be. The craftsmanship of the concealment was remarkable, explaining why it had gone undetected for so long. "They're packing up," Mike whispered from his position. "Should we move in now?" Bradley's voice was firm. "Negative. Let them leave. We follow at a distance and see where they go. We need to know if there are others involved." Sarah watched as Hayes tucked his flashlight away and shouldered the leather satchel, now considerably lighter than when he'd arrived. Webb moved to the door, checking the corridor before signaling that it was clear to proceed. As the two men prepared to leave, Rex made a sound Sarah had never heard before, a low, mournful whine that seemed to express the betrayal they were all feeling. Robert Hayes wasn't just a criminal. He was someone they had trusted, someone who had sworn an oath to serve justice. Someone who had access to every aspect of the courthouse's operations. How long has this been going on? Sarah whispered to herself, but her radio picked up the question. Based on the camera malfunctions, at least 2 months, Bradley responded. But given how smoothly they operated, probably much longer. The courtroom door closed with the same soft creak that had announced their arrival, leaving behind only the lingering scent that had driven 5 different police dogs to desperation. Sarah remained frozen in position, her mind struggling to process what she had witnessed. A courthouse employee with unrestricted access had turned Judge Torres' bench, the very symbol of justice, into a distribution point for what was obviously a sophisticated drug operation. The implications were staggering. How many cases had been compromised? How many criminals had walked free? How many victims had been denied justice? Subjects are leaving the building, Bradley reported. Same exit they used coming in. Should we pursue? Sarah looked down at Rex, whose eyes seemed to reflect her own sense of betrayal and determination. No, she said finally. We have enough evidence to start building a case. But this goes deeper than just Hayes and Webb. We need to be smart about our next move. As the courthouse returned to its nighttime silence, Sarah realized that everything she thought she knew about the justice system had just been shattered. The temple of law had been desecrated, and the corruption ran deeper than anyone had imagined. The decision to move in came at 2:47 a.m., 3 hours after Hayes and Webb had left the courthouse. Security Chief Bradley had spent those hours coordinating with federal authorities, knowing that courthouse corruption fell under FBI jurisdiction. By the time Special Agent Lisa Martinez arrived with her team, the local officers had documented everything with military precision. We go in clean and quiet. Agent Martinez instructed the assembled team in the courthouse parking lot. This is evidence collection first, arrest second. We need to understand the full scope of this operation before anyone lawyers up. Detective Sarah Chen felt her stomach churning as they approached Courtroom 3B for the second time that night. Rex padded silently beside her, his earlier agitation replaced by focused determination. The German shepherd seemed to understand that this time, they were here to act on what he had been trying to tell them for weeks. The courtroom looked exactly as Hayes had left it, pristine, professional, giving no hint of the criminal enterprise that had been operating beneath the symbol of justice itself. Agent Martinez directed her evidence technicians to photograph everything before any examination began. Show me where they accessed the compartment, Martinez said to Sarah, who guided her to the spot where Hayes had knelt beside the judge's bench. Under the harsh glare of portable floodlights, the bench looked even more imposing. Martinez ran her gloved hands along the wood paneling where Sarah had seen Hayes work. Here, she said, finding the nearly invisible seam, professional carpentry work. This modification took serious planning and skill. The hidden panel opened with the same soft click Sarah had heard through her surveillance equipment. But seeing the compartment in full light was far more shocking than watching through night vision. The space was larger than it had appeared, roughly 3 feet wide, 2 feet deep, and 18 inches high. Custom foam padding lined the interior, designed to prevent any sound or movement of contents. Jesus, whispered Officer Mike Rodriguez, Scout straining at his leash as the familiar scents hit the air. It's like a professional safe deposit box. But it was Agent Martinez's sharp intake of breath that made everyone look closer. The compartment wasn't empty. Hayes had removed packages, but he had also left others behind. Martinez carefully extracted the remaining contents, her evidence technicians photographing every step of the process. The first package was wrapped in multiple layers of vacuum-sealed plastic, professional-grade packaging that would defeat even the most sensitive detection equipment except for the noses of trained police dogs. When Martinez carefully opened the corner for field testing, the results were immediate and devastating. Cocaine, she announced. High purity, probably uncut. She moved to the second package, heroin. A third package revealed synthetic opioids that field tests suggested were fentanyl-based compounds. Sarah watched in horrified fascination as the evidence continued to emerge, package after package, each representing thousands of street-level sales, hundreds of overdoses, countless destroyed lives. The judge's bench, the very heart of the justice system, had been converted into a distribution warehouse for enough narcotics to supply half the county. How much are we looking at? Bradley asked, his voice tight with disbelief. Agent Martinez consulted with her drug assessment specialist, who was weighing and cataloging each package. Conservative street value estimate, to $0.3 million. But that's just what's here now, based on the packaging rotation we observed. This operation processes significantly more volume. Rex finally couldn't contain himself any longer. The German Shepherd's training took over as he detected the concentrated narcotics just feet away. His bark echoed through the marble chamber, sharp, urgent, triumphant. After weeks of frustrated alerts, he was finally being allowed to do his job. "Good boy, Rex," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "You were right all along." As the evidence collection continued, a clearer picture of the operation's sophistication emerged. The compartment contained more than just drugs. Martinez discovered detailed logs written in what appeared to be coded language, documenting dates, quantities, and what looked like financial transactions. There were also several high-end smartphones, apparently used for secure communications. "This isn't some street-level dealing operation," Martinez observed, studying the logistics documentation. "This is wholesale distribution with careful inventory management and quality control. Someone with serious business experience designed this system." The most chilling discovery came when Martinez accessed one of the phones. Text message threads revealed a network that extended far beyond Hayes and Webb. References to courthouse schedules, evidence room protocols, and case dismissal procedures painted a picture of systematic corruption that infected multiple levels of the justice system. "Look at this," Martinez said, showing her phone screen to Bradley. "They're not just using the courthouse for storage, they're manipulating the entire legal process. Cases are being dismissed, evidence is disappearing, sentences are being reduced. This is judicial corruption on a scale I've never seen." Bradley felt physically ill as he read the messages. 12 years he'd worked courthouse security, believing he was protecting the integrity of the justice system. Now he realized he'd been guarding the very corruption that was destroying it. From within, Officer Rodriguez, meanwhile, had made his own disturbing discovery. "Agent Martinez, you need to see this." He was examining the bench's construction more closely. "This modification wasn't recent. Look at the wood staining, the wear patterns. This compartment has been here for years, maybe decades. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. This wasn't a recent corruption, it was a long-established system that had been operating under their noses for possibly decades. How many cases had been compromised? How many criminals had walked free? How many victims had been denied justice while drugs flowed through the very institution designed to protect society?" Agent Martinez stood slowly, looking around the courtroom with new eyes. "We're not just dealing with a drug distribution network," she said grimly. "We're looking at the complete corruption of judicial proceedings. Every case tried in this courtroom is now suspect." Sarah felt Rex lean against her leg, the dog's solid presence providing comfort in a moment when everything she believed about justice was crumbling around her. But as she looked at her partner's alert, determined expression, she realized that sometimes the truth came from the most unexpected sources. "At least now we know why the dogs kept barking," she said quietly. "They were trying to tell us that justice itself had been poisoned. The investigation was just beginning, but already it was clear that the corruption ran deeper than anyone had imagined, threatening the very foundation of the legal system they had all sworn to protect." The arrest began at dawn. FBI Special Agent Lisa Martinez had spent the remaining hours of the night coordinating with federal prosecutors, obtaining warrants, and assembling arrest teams. By 6 a.m., simultaneous raids were underway across 3 counties as the full scope of the corruption network became clear. Robert Hayes was taken into custody at his modest suburban home in Riverside, his wife screaming in confusion as federal agents led him away in handcuffs. The search of his property revealed a sophisticated home office with encrypted computers, detailed financial records, and over $400,000 in cash hidden throughout the house. But it was Hayes' personal safe that yielded the most damaging evidence: a complete roster of courthouse employees involved in the conspiracy. He kept records on everyone. Agent Martinez told Detective Sarah Chan as they reviewed the seized documents: names, positions, payment amounts, specific services provided. Hayes wasn't just a participant, he was the coordinator. The roster read like a courthouse directory of corruption. Margaret Stillwell, a court reporter with 14 years of experience, had been altering transcripts to benefit connected defendants. Thomas Chen, a bailiff in Judge Torres' courtroom, had been providing advance warning of raids and investigations. Linda Morrison, an evidence clerk, had been ensuring that crucial evidence disappeared or was contaminated before trial. But the most shocking revelation came from Hayes' financial records. The operation had been generating over $3 million annually for the past 4 years, with payments reaching into virtually every department of the courthouse. Janitors received bonuses for cleaning schedules that accommodated the night operations. Security guards were paid to ignore camera malfunctions. Even some attorneys had been receiving payments for strategic case delays and procedural errors. Marcus Webb, arrested at his girlfriend's apartment, proved more talkative than expected. Once federal prosecutors offered him a plea deal. In a recorded confession that lasted 6 hours, Webb revealed the operation's true scope and his role as a liaison between courthouse employees and the Salazar drug cartel. It started small, Webb explained to investigators, his voice hollow, with the realization that his cooperation was his only chance to avoid life imprisonment. Just information about police operations, maybe a heads up about raids. But Hayes saw the bigger picture. He realized the courthouse itself could be the perfect distribution hub. Webb's confession revealed the genius of Hayes' plan. The courthouse was never searched by law enforcement, it was law enforcement. Drugs could be stored there indefinitely without risk of discovery, and the constant flow of people provided perfect cover for distribution. Court employees could pick up packages during normal work hours, while Hayes coordinated everything from his clerk's office computer. Judge Margaret Torres received the news in her chambers at 8 a.m., delivered personally by Agent Martinez and Courthouse Administrator Jana Phillips. The 15-year veteran of the bench listened in stunned silence as they explained that her courtroom had been the center of a multi-million-dollar drug operation. For years. How many cases? Torres asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How many decisions I made were influenced by this corruption? Phillips consulted her preliminary analysis. Judge, we're looking at potentially hundreds of cases over the past 4 years. Drug charges dismissed on technicalities. Evidence ruled inadmissible due to chain of custody issues. Sentences that seemed unusually lenient, all of it needs to be reviewed. Torres felt her world collapsing. Every ruling she'd made, every sentence she'd handed down, was now suspect. Defense attorneys would challenge everything. Prosecutors would demand retrials, and victims' families would question whether justice had ever been served in her courtroom. The media response was swift and devastating. By noon, news vans surrounded the courthouse as reporters struggled to comprehend the scope of the scandal. Courthouse corruption, judges' bench used as drug depot, screamed the headlines. Television anchors spoke in grave tones about the complete breakdown of judicial integrity and the erosion of public trust in the legal system. District Attorney Rebecca Morrison called an emergency press conference, flanked by FBI officials and county administrators. This investigation has revealed corruption at a scale unprecedented in California's judicial history, she announced. We are reviewing every case processed through Courtroom 3B over the past 5 years, and will ensure that justice is properly served. But the human cost was already mounting. Families of overdose victims demanded to know if their loved ones might have lived if the drugs hadn't been flowing through the courthouse. Defense attorneys filed motions challenging hundreds of convictions, arguing that their clients couldn't receive fair trials in a corrupted system. Prosecutors faced the nightmare of potentially retrying cases where evidence had been compromised or destroyed. Detective Chen found herself at the center of the media storm, praised for her persistence in following Rex's instincts despite official skepticism. But the praise felt hollow as she contemplated the implications of what they'd uncovered. How did we miss this for so long? She asked Agent Martinez during a brief break in the interrogations. Martinez looked tired, the weight of the investigation evident in her expression. Because we trusted the system, Sarah. We assumed that the people sworn to uphold justice actually believed in it. Hayes and his network exploited that trust, turning our own institutions against us. The investigation team discovered that the conspiracy had connections reaching into the state attorney general's office and possibly federal courts. Phone records revealed communication with judges in adjacent counties, suggesting the network extended far beyond Riverside. What had started as a single courthouse corruption case was evolving into a multi-state federal investigation. By evening, 7 courthouse employees had been arrested, with more arrests expected as the investigation continued. The Riverside County Courthouse was effectively shut down, with all cases being transferred to adjacent facilities. While investigators combed through years of potentially compromised proceedings, Judge Torres submitted her resignation that afternoon, knowing that her continued presence would be a distraction from the pursuit of justice. In her resignation letter, she wrote, The corruption of Courtroom 3B has destroyed not just my career, but the faith of countless citizens in our justice system. I can only hope that my departure allows the healing process to begin. As the sun set on what would become known as Black Friday in Riverside County legal circles, one thing was clear: the barking of 5 police dogs had exposed corruption that threatened the very foundation of American jurisprudence. The system designed to protect society had been turned against it, and rebuilding that trust would take years, if it could be rebuilt at all. 18 months after the scandal that rocked Riverside County to its core, Courtroom 3B finally reopened its doors. The chamber had been completely gutted and rebuilt, every inch scrutinized by federal investigators and reconstructed under the watchful eyes of transparency advocates. The original judge's bench, tainted forever by its role as a drug depot, had been removed and replaced with a modern design featuring glass panels, an open construction that made concealment impossible. Detective Sarah Chen stood in the gallery, Rex at her side, watching as the first case was called in the renovated courtroom. The German Shepherd showed no interest in the new bench, no alerting, no agitation, just the calm professionalism that had made him one of the county's most trusted K-9 officers. After months of therapy and retraining to help him process the traumatic events, Rex had returned to full duty with an even stronger bond with his partner. "Feels different, doesn't it?" Officer Mike Rodriguez said, joining Sarah with Scout. The chocolate Labrador had also undergone extensive retraining, helping both dogs overcome the stress of being ignored when their instincts had been desperately trying to protect the community. The presiding judge was the Honorable David Kim, transferred from Los Angeles County specifically to help restore public confidence in the Riverside judicial system. Judge Kim had implemented revolutionary transparency measures. All court proceedings were live-streamed. Security cameras operated 24/7 with feeds accessible to courthouse administrators, and a citizen oversight committee reviewed all security protocols monthly. The trials of the corruption network had concluded 3 months earlier, delivering justice that many thought would never come. Robert Hayes, the mastermind court clerk, received a federal sentence of 25 years without parole. His detailed cooperation with investigators had helped expose the full scope of the network, but it couldn't erase the damage he caused to hundreds of cases and thousands of lives. Marcus Webb, whose confession had been crucial to understanding the cartel connections, received life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. His attorney had argued for leniency based on his cooperation, but federal prosecutors successfully demonstrated that his role as a liaison between courthouse employees and the Salazar cartel made him equally responsible for every overdose and every corrupted case. The other courthouse employees faced sentences ranging from 8 to 18 years. Margaret Stillwell, the court reporter who had altered transcripts, wept as she was sentenced to 12 years, her career and reputation destroyed by her participation in the conspiracy. Thomas Chen, the bailiff who had provided inside information, received 15 years. His betrayal of his oath particularly galling to the judge who sentenced him. But the most significant victory came in the systematic review of compromised cases. A special federal task force had spent over a year examining every case processed through Courtroom 3B. During the corruption period, of the 847 cases reviewed, 312 were identified as potentially compromised and eligible for retrial or appeal. Maria Santos, whose son had died from a fentanyl overdose while his dealer walked free on a technicality, finally saw justice served when the dealer was retried and sentenced to 20 years. "I knew something was wrong when that judge dismissed the charges," she told reporters after the sentencing. "My son's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was the direct result of corruption that let killers walk free." The financial impact of the corruption had been staggering. The final audit revealed that the network had processed over $15 million in narcotics through the courthouse over 6 years, with courthouse employees receiving approximately $2.8 million in bribes and payments. Victim restitution funds, established through the seizure of Hayes assets and cartel money, provided some compensation to families affected by the corrupted cases. Detective Chen had become something of a celebrity in law enforcement circles, invited to speak at conferences about the importance of trusting K-9 instincts, even when they seemed inexplicable. Rex wasn't just alerting to drugs, she explained to a gathering of federal agents. He was alerting to the corruption of justice itself. Dogs can sense things we miss, not just chemical compounds, but the wrongness that comes when institutions are perverted from their purpose. The Riverside County Courthouse had implemented the most comprehensive security overhaul in California history. Every employee underwent extensive background checks and polygraph examinations. Access controls were completely redesigned, with biometric scanners and continuous monitoring. Most importantly, random K-9 sweeps became a monthly routine, with different dogs from different agencies ensuring that no pattern could be exploited. Rex had been awarded the Medal of Valor by the California Peace Officers Association, the first K-9 to receive the honor for detecting corruption rather than traditional criminal activity. At the ceremony, attended by hundreds of law enforcement officers and their families, Rex sat stoically as the medal was placed around his neck, his dark eyes reflecting the weight of responsibility he carried. "Sometimes heroes have 4 legs and can't speak," said Governor Patricia Williams during the ceremony. "But their actions speak louder than any words." Rex and the other K-9 officers who detected this corruption saved our justice system from complete collapse. Judge Kim's first major ruling in the renovated Courtroom 3B came in a drug trafficking case eerily similar to those that had been corrupted by the Hayes Network. The defendant, facing overwhelming evidence, received the maximum sentence allowed by law. "This courtroom will never again be a haven for corruption," Judge Kim declared. "Justice delayed is justice denied, but justice corrupted is justice destroyed. We will not allow that to happen again." As the ceremony concluded and the courthouse returned to its daily operations, Sarah walked Rex through the same corridors, where his desperate barking had first alerted her to the corruption. The German shepherd moved with quiet confidence, his job complete, but his vigilance eternal. "Good boy, Rex," Sarah whispered, kneeling to embrace her partner. "You saved more than just cases, you saved justice itself." The Riverside County Courthouse scandal had become a cautionary tale studied in law schools and police academies across the nation. But it had also become a testament to the power of persistence, the importance of trusting instincts, and the unbreakable bond between officers and their K-9 partners. Sometimes, the most important voices in the justice system are the ones that cannot speak but refuse to be silenced.